Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Door County. My name is Carrie Link, and I will be the service leader for this morning's service. And thank you, Jason, very much for the beautiful prelude. We're always happy to have you here. There's another person that we are very happy to see and who is here this morning and needs to be recognized, and that is Sally Malm. And we'd like to have you stand, Sally. Sally is going to be celebrating her 90th birthday next week, so I think it's only appropriate that we sing happy birthday to her today. Okay? Happy birthday to you. Happy Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sally. Happy birthday to you. And another founding member, Lynn Lees, who is not here today, ordered a cake, which we will be enjoying during coffee and conversation. And another founding member, Helene DeYulio, is responsible for the insert in your order of service. So happy birthday, Sally. she everyone made sure that she only got a blank order of service. Okay, and as a way of welcoming, I offer these words by Louis Hergert. Love is the doctrine of this fellowship. Our faith in each other is its sacrament. Working for justice and living with compassion is its prayer. Reverently, we covenant together to side with love, to heal and not to harm, and to share hope with each other and with the world. Thank you all again for your presence here this morning. I'm wondering if there are any visitors who are here or anyone who has not been here for a while. We invite you to stand, but I'm really not seeing too many unfamiliar faces. So, oh, sorry. Hello. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I hope you've had a chance to sign the guest book, and if not, please do so. After the postlude, everyone is invited into the gathering room for coffee, tea, and cake. And after about 15 to 20 minutes, the chimes will sound. And that's the signal to return back here for the talk back with our speaker, who is Garrett Bucks. You are able to read quite a bit of bio information on the front of your order of service, but in addition to frequent speaking engagements, he finds time to write, father his 2 boys, and is a member of Milwaukee Friends meeting. We're looking forward to your message, Garrett. The announcements on the back of the order of service usually pertain just to UUFDC, but if there is anyone else that would like to make an announcement, Phil Freistadt can bring the microphone to you. I'm hoping my voice will hold out. Please forgive me.
Hi, there is a new exhibition in the gallery. It is a collection of Christmas cards and gift cards from their collection. They have collected all of the presidents, and it's just going to be a wonderful show for this time of year. So thank you to Buttons. You could stand up, You don't know these people, so I wanted to be sure. So we will have it after the talk back. I think Buttons or Hank might want to make a few additional comments rather than go back into the gallery. We'll just do that right immediately after the talk back. Okay. And of course, they'll be around for questions. Hank?
I'm always at a loss for words. It was in 1994. I was on a business trip, and I picked up a copy of USA Today. If any of you have been on business trips back in the 90s, you remember USA Today, still around. But in any case, there was an article in I think they had an arts section or culture section or something, and it was about an exhibit at the Smithsonian and of presidential Christmas cards. And it was at the Postal Museum of the Smithsonian. I cut the article out, ripped it out, whatever, and brought it home, gave it to Buttons, and I think within about 2 days, she had loaded up the Subaru Outback and headed to Washington, D.C. because she wanted to see the exhibit. Always been fascinated with Christmas cards. It was a pretty small exhibit, though, as she tells me, but it was the genesis for beginning our own collection, which I think is quite a bit larger than that collection had been. We have 17 cards out there, excuse me, and they date back to Herbert Hoover. Initially, the cards were not sent out in great numbers, so the older they are, the rarer they are. John Kennedy sent out about 1,800. George W. Bush sent out 2 million.
Oh my gosh.
And I have no idea how many Trump and Biden sent out. But in any case, I'll be back there. Ask us some questions. We'd love to share them with you. We put them in the house. We put them in our Snow Star store back when we had a couple of stores. And it's just a fascinating piece of Americana.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jamie Palmer. I'm the other half of this guy. Thank you. This Saturday, December 14th at 4 o'clock at the Gala, which is a new venue in Sturgeon Bay, the Peninsula Symphonic Band and the Swing and Door Big Band are going to put on their Christmas holiday concert. So we'd like to invite all of you to join us. It's a free concert. Jason will be conducting both of the bands. So hopefully see you there.
Jamie, where is the gala?
Oh boy, the Gala. How do you describe where it is?
Corner of Egg Harbor Road and 12th Avenue.
Okay. Yeah, near Verley, the gun shooting place and the axe throwing place called the Sandbox. And then
Oh.
there's the Gala.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, sorry to step on your toes, but this afternoon at 3 o'clock, just a little closer, is the Peninsula Singers Concert together with the community choir. And we're doing choruses from the Messiah and then a lot of great Christmas music. So at the First Baptist Church, just over the river and down the woods, no, down the road, and 3 o'clock, and it also is free. We ask for donations because our directors aren't free and neither is our rehearsal space. But anyway, we'd love to see you there. It was a great concert last night in Sturgeon Bay, and we're happy to repeat it this afternoon.
Thank you, Peggy.
Hi, Judy Brudd. I'm speaking here as an individual. As you all know, we have a Supreme Court election coming up, and we do have nomination papers to sign. This is a nonpartisan election, and there's information about Susan Crawford, who is the candidate that Indivisible is supporting, and there's information at the counter about her, as well as nomination papers to sign, and she can't get on the ballot unless we sign the papers. So thank you very much.
I will second what Peggy said. I was at the concert last night and it was fabulous. So if you can, please take advantage of the opportunity this afternoon to hear them. They did a wonderful job, wonderful selections, and very, very enjoyable. I also have another announcement. I believe there's a poster up out there about it. Rogue Theater is doing a production of Hallelujah Girls. The performances will be the weekend before Christmas, after Christmas, and the first weekend in July and in January.
Wow.
Haven't had my coffee yet this morning. Yes, and I do have a part in that.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Phil. I will now quote words by Adam Slate while Jan Freistack lights our chalice. When the great mosaic of humanity is treated with respect and dignity, when no person is threatened by hunger or war, when we have extended hospitality to the stranger and tended to the sick, when equity and justice reign everywhere, then we shall all be free. We light this flame to hold that moment in our spirit and in our minds until we can make it real. Please stand as you are able in body or spirit for hymn number 6, and then please remain standing for the unison affirmation and doxology. We gather together to seek knowledge and wisdom, to explore freely the vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within a caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives. This is a time in our service when we can share something that may have given you some happiness, or possibly you have encountered something that has caused you sadness. If you would like to share, please raise your hand and Phil will bring the microphone to you.
Well, good morning. I'm Ken Boyd. I'm here to report that Carol is starting her 4th week in a hospital.
Oh,
She is now down in Grafton, Wisconsin, where we hope to find answers for her problem. St. Vincent's is not really the level of hospital care that she's needing. So keep her all in our thoughts. And this week, I think, will be the deciding week about what happens ultimately.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. Thank you, Ken. We definitely will keep her in our thoughts.
I make this announcement every year at this time that I will not be here next week because I will be in Orlando, Florida for the largest dog show in the country. And my sister-in-law again is competing in dog agility with her dog. So for the 5 days we are there, I'm a dog roadie. Chinese crested. She runs a Chinese crested named Boo Weekly, and she has bred and competed with the most accomplished Chinese cresteds in dog agility in the world.
Wow.
To add to the celebration of Sally's 90th birthday, we have a display in the gathering room where you will see have your coffee and cake later. For many years, Sally is a watercolorist, as it says. For many years, she presented her best friends, and I was happy to be one of them, with framed little cards of her Christmas cards. I'm sorry, I'm stuttering. Anyway, they're in there, as well as the cookbook of her Sally's Salads and our cookbook that we published back in 2006 with her recipes. And then also the larger book with one of her watercolors that is Door County Wild Places, and it's on a stand in there too. So do take a look at everything, because there's a lot of things about Sally that you found out, but some that you don't know yet.
We'll look forward to that.
Hi, Pam Good. Two things. One is that our youngest grandson, Trey, has been accepted early decision to Grinnell College. We had at least one other Grinnellian in the room, so that he's over the moon, and we're so excited for him. And the other thing is, and I'm sure many of you saw it, that there was a recent article in the Washington Post that told 5 things that you could do to get through what many of us are looking at as a doom and gloom time. And number 2 on the list was to get into a UU congregation.
Wow.
And I think number 4 on the list was to join Indivisible.
Wow.
That is great news to share. Thank you. My name is Mary Smythe, and I'm here to give you a small update on Karen Gatenby, who several weeks ago was suddenly diagnosed with liver cancer, and the surgery was maybe a week and a half ago. It was less significant than they thought they would have to do going in. She recovered more quickly than the doctors thought she might. And came home on Thursday. So she's doing well, weak and post-surgically, and has to go back Wednesday when they'll get all the biopsy results and be told what kind of chemotherapy that specific cancer is most responsive to. So the news is good. Strong news, but positive too.
Thank you, Mary.
So earlier this year, Braden City, a 3-sport athlete who graduated from Gibraltar last year, was diagnosed with lymphoma and wasn't able to go play football at UW La Crosse. And he was an all-state receiver for us last year. He was a really good athlete. And I have good news to report that yesterday was his last day of chemo. And I guess it's kind of an announcement as well. Husby's has a fundraiser for him this Wednesday from 11 a.m. to close, in case you want to show your support. And they got like silent auction, that kind of thing, to support his family. So thanks.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Thank you, Bob Boltman. This is part joy and part concern. There's someone else in the room who has a landmark birthday this week. This young man turned 16.
Whoa.
And
Stay off the roads.
Well, and that's actually not my concern. He's a great driver, but I anticipate on Tuesday when he goes to take his test, he will pass. My concern is that I might see him less.
Yeah. Phil?
I just wanted to share what a great congregation you all have. Karen and I were presented with a poinsettia by the Caring Committee last week, delivered by Jim Black. We were surprised and delighted, so thank you all.
Yes, our caring committee is absolutely wonderful. I think that will do it. Thank you. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values. Please join me in a moment of silence in order to clear our busy minds and be open to this morning's message.
Good morning, everybody. If it's all right with you, I'd like to begin with a reading, not from me, but from Norman McLean, who, like me, is a Montanan who lived most of his life in the Midwest. After my brother's death, my father never walked very well again. He had to struggle to lift his feet, and when he did get them up, they came down slightly out of control. From time to time, Paul's right hand had to be reaffirmed. Then my father would shuffle away again. He could not shuffle in a straight line from trying to lift his feet. Like many Scottish ministers before him, he had to derive what comfort he could from the faith that his son had died fighting. For some time, though, he struggled for more to hold on to. "Are you sure you've told me everything you know about his death?" he asked. I said, "Everything." "It's not much, is it?" "No," I replied, "but you can love completely without complete understanding." "That I have known and preached," my father said. Once my father came back with another question. "Do you think I could have helped him?" he asked. Even if I might have thought longer, I would have made the same answer. Do you think I could have helped him? I answered. We stood waiting in deference to each other. How can a question be answered that asks a lifetime of questions? After a long time, he came up with something he must have wanted to ask from the first. Do you think it was just a stick up and foolishly he tried to fight his way out? You know what I mean, that it wasn't connected with anything in his past. The police don't know, I said. But do you? He asked, and I felt the implication. I've told you all I know. If you push me far enough, all I really know is that he was a fine fisherman. You know more than that, my father said. He was beautiful. Yes, I said. He was beautiful. He should have been. You taught him. My father looked at me for a long time. He just looked at me. So this was the last he and I ever said to each other about Paul's death. Of course, now I'm too old to be much of a fisherman myself. And now, of course, I usually fish the big waters myself, although some friends think I shouldn't. Like many fly fishermen in western Montana, where the summer days are almost Arctic in length, I often do not start fishing until the cool of the evening. Then, in the Arctic half-light of the canyon, all existence fades to a being with my soul and memories and the sounds of the big Blackfoot River and a 4-count rhythm and the hope that a fish will rise. Eventually, all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. The river was cut by the world's great flood and runs over rocks from the basement of time. On some of the rocks are timeless raindrops. Under the rocks are the words, and some of the words are theirs. I am haunted by waters. Those words were written about waters more generally, but also a very specific set of waters, the Clark Fork and the Big Blackfoot River, which is also where I got to grow up, around Missoula, Montana. And those same words, just about a mile from the rivers that inspired those words, were where I was delivered an incredibly wise set of words. And I have already made the amazing rhetorical mistake of the best words I've got for you, I've already spoiled. I put them in the title of the message. And I even gave a description of at some point, in where those words came from. So I'm going to spoil the ending already. So if you need to go after this, that's totally okay. But I was raised a Methodist, and I was fortunate to be raised in First United Methodist Church in Missoula, Montana, with a really special pastor, a man named Steve Garnis Holmes. And he's kind of a mystical figure. He didn't do a lot of things linearly, Steve did. And that included his confirmation class for us teenagers. And so I don't know necessarily if we learned what we were supposed to about the Bible and all that, but we just kind of sit around with some kind of beautiful Western Montana vista around us while Steve said things that were sometimes rambling and sometimes very, very wise. And that was the nature of my confirmation process, probably inspired me to be long-winded myself. But in particular, it really did lead towards a climax, though. And I remember we were sitting in the Rattlesnake area, kind of this narrow mountain canyon in my hometown of Missoula. And we were on a back porch. And somehow it kind of got our teenage attention, Reverend Steve did, and said, this is really the message you need to hear right now. If I teach you nothing else, it's this. And that message, which again, I've already spoiled for you in the title, is that there are only two religions in the world. There is the religion of being right, and there is the religion of being in love. And the only rule is you can't be a member of both at the same time. Now, I was a very good confirmation student. So I listened to him and I got it. That I can tell that was a wise message. I'm going to accept it as a wise message. Done. 4 problems, though, with my internalization of that message. The first and most obvious one, I was a teenager. So I was actively not internalizing any of the messages I was receiving. Ask me how much calculus I currently know, and you will learn how many teenage messages I actually metabolized correctly, right? So that was the first problem. Second problem is that I already knew enough, even though I was just a teenager, that there's a lot of things I didn't love about the world. And as somebody who had been raised by activist parents who craved justice and craved a more caring and just world, I had already grown up in a world of where government turned its back on its own citizens and did less and less for them. I had already grown up in a world of multiple wars. I'd already grown up in a world where I was well aware of all the ways that we divided up each other, by skin color, by gender, by class, by sexual orientation. So I learned there was a lot of things I was really angry about that I was not in love with. Quite frankly, I thought the way I was raised to look at the world by progressive parents, I think it was pretty right. And that then went to the third reason why it was actually hard to internalize that message, which was I had a lot of doubts about my own ability to actually be a good, loving person. And those doubts would only increase as I kept walking through the world. And finally, I had a lot of counterpoints around me, even from good, caring people. To set the stage for where I grew up in a very, very special place, but a very particular place. Missoula, Montana, if folks aren't familiar, it's a college town. It's a college town in a big rural state. And it's one of the largest communities for probably about a 200-mile radius, right? But before it was a college town, it was a number of other things. It was a logging town. It was a railroad town. For that, of course, it was a town that the Salish and the Kootenai and the Pend d'Oreille fought over viciously. It's always been, and every, like striations in the mountains above us, it's a town that all of those layers it still has. So the Missoula I grew up on had a lot of college town hippies and retired college town hippies. It also had a bunch of old loggers and old foresters, guys who drove big trucks. And it was a town where I noticed that the grown-ups around me kind of living in an uneasy truce, that there were a lot of opinions about how to be in the religion of being right. And I also was learning how to live that uneasy truth. That I was seeing guys in my high school that I thought the way they treat women or the way they treat gay kids or the way they talk about Native kids, I'm not like that. I don't think I was wrong about that. But I noticed I took a lot of pride in how much I wasn't like those guys. And so if they were driving the truck, I was going to ride my bike. They hunted, well, I'm a vegetarian. Why am I a vegetarian? Because they're not. And luckily, there's a lot of places, a lot of pathways for self-righteous young people like myself. We call them liberal arts colleges. So I got to continue to go exploring my pathway in what I thought was the religion of being love, because I thought it was about justice, right? And in many ways it was, right? But it was also about if I can develop the best opinions possible, and if I can state them with the most fervor possible, if I can distinguish myself between folks who aren't like me, in particular other white people who I think are more racist than me, or other men who I think are more sexist than me, or other straight people who I think are more homophobic than me, if I can just distinguish myself, that will be a life well lived. So I was a college activist, probably the person people avoided seeing on campus because I had a petition to sign or was trying to get them to take them to this protest or another protest all the time. And then after college, I realized there were also a lot of do-gooder careers for folks like me. And again, lots of these moves I'm very proud of, right? Standing up and being a righteous voice for justice, I'm very proud of. Saying that my career choice is I'm not just going to try to look out for myself, but I'm going to try to say, how can I contribute well to a community? Those are all really good things, right? And it's a lot of moments where you can follow those good paths, follow that religion of being in love, and the religion of being right can sneak in. And I discovered how insidious that was in my first job out of college. I was a teacher. I'm sure not the only one who that was in this congregation right now, who that was the first job they had out of college or the only job they had out of college. For me, I was a teacher through a program called Teach for America, kind of a domestic Peace Corps kind of program, right? So I wasn't just a teacher. I was part of a core of people saying, we are going to do good together. And we're not just going to be teachers. We're going to be teachers in the places in this country that needs us the most. The many of us, not all of us, but many of us defined as places that we didn't go to school, right? So for me, that meant that I went with a cohort of other very, very righteous, very, very overly educated young people down to the Navajo Nation of New Mexico. And if you had asked me how I feel about this decision, I would have said, this feels very right to me. If you had really asked me how I felt about the decision, I was terrified. I was terrified because this is where it actually, was going to come to shove one way or another. If I said I wanted to be a good person, caring person, live a life full of love, and I failed as my first gig out of college as a fifth grade teacher, if I was all of these 11-year-olds' worst teacher ever, then that made a lot of things, right? In particular, with everything I'd studied, that meant that as a white guy, I wasn't just a bad teacher, but I was going to be a colonist, I was going to be a missionary, and I was going to be everything that I hated in American history, right? So I moved down to New Mexico with a used Toyota Corolla, a whole lot of books that did not teach me how to teach well, and an entire body full of fears that I was going to mess this up. And it's in those moments I've found, those moments when I am connecting with people, but the louder voice inside me is about my own insecurities, that the religion of being right sneaks out particularly strongly. So I came down to New Mexico. And I did a lot of things, again, that I was really proud of. Boy, I made a lot of mistakes as a teacher. Pro tip for anyone who is entering a fifth grade classroom. Do not leave an open box of chalk right next to your biggest class clown. That gentleman will find that, cover his entire face like a ghost, and go haunting the entire classroom. Don't do that. That's a dumb rookie mistake. Also, do not give your children permission because you think it's teaching them kind of leadership skills and construction skills and engineering skills, instead of just having a Halloween party where you bring out some buckets of candy and show it's the great pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Do not think you're being a slick, better than everyone else teacher by saying, oh yeah, kids, you can construct a haunted house in the classroom. And do not get so excited that your kids are very excited about this idea and that you're thinking, well, they're really taking initiative. These are future engineers here, that you turn a blind eye as they bring, you notice that all your kids have somehow coordinated together to bring huge amounts of cardboard boxes on the day of Halloween into your classroom. Do not look at this if you're a young teacher and say, oh, this is, man, I'm really nailing it. Look how much they work together. Not noticing that their plan is to cut holes in the cardboard boxes, put sheets over chairs so they can hide under the sheets. Then, while you're still just watching this is great, go to the kindergarten classrooms, invite them into your haunted house, and not discover until the first kindergartner's gone through that the haunted house is just my kids, my fifth graders, punching kindergartners as they go through. I had a lot of explaining to do that day. So lots of mistakes, but also a lot of things that I was pretty pleased. I worked hard. I put in the long nights. I drove to my kids' houses. I really, really did care. And I really did love them. They were a delightful group, my first 11-year-olds. But the doubts were still there. The doubts were especially there the day of Halloween, but the doubts were there generally. And I noticed that the best way to silence those doubts was to find a foil, to find somebody else, another teacher that I could think I was better than. And in that particular school, majority of teachers were white. And majority of us had come from someplace else, which is its own story. And the two groups of white teachers, the two largest groups, were folks like me, these young, progressive, ready to take on the world, ready to save the world, although we did not want to use that word. We really wanted to save the world. Young people through programs like Teach for America or Return Peace Corps volunteers, there were us. And then there were these other sets of teachers, the majority of whom had come from hiring fairs in Oklahoma, the majority of whom were career changers, were older teachers, were definitely more conservative politically in their background, also had a different class background than many of us, right? Had long meandering careers in working class jobs, former truckers, former factory workers, before they came to the classroom. And the thing about these Okies, these other teachers, they were so nice to me. They were the ones who, when I first moved to town, I had nothing in my apartment, they filled the apartment. They were the ones who invited me to potlucks and bonfires. And I thought I was being nice to them too. But few things. One, I never really reciprocated any of those offers. I never invited them to anything. And when I'd get back with my TFA buddies, we'd talk about them. And we'd tell stories about them. And a lot of the stories were apocryphal. Maybe they were true, maybe they weren't. We said that one of them we heard was doing a play church in her classroom because she thought, she said, as the rumor went it, she said that the only thing that I can do for these kids is to save their souls. So, well, that's dangerous on a lot of levels. We're mad at her. We're mad at them. We must be better teachers than them. And I noticed the more that I judged them, judged their politics, judged I assumed how hard they were or weren't working in their classroom, judged the fact that my light was on earlier than theirs was, the more my own doubts went away. What I didn't notice was they may have been doing the same thing about me. And I didn't notice that until a day in my second year teaching. It was my birthday. And one of the other things that had happened to me in college, besides going to a lot of protests, was I had converted to Quakerism. That's when I first became a Quaker. And one of the things about Quakerism is we're really, really into the truth. And we're really into not taking oaths because of our commitment to the truth. The idea is let your ayes be ayes and your nays be nays. So you shouldn't take an oath because that establishes, if you're saying, I am particularly telling the truth in this moment, gives the lie that you should always be telling the truth. Some relatively pedantic old Quaker theology, though, that I probably did not explain well to my kids when I said, in my classroom, I can't say the pledge, so I'm not going to make you stand up and say the pledge. Didn't make a big deal out of it, but that's just how we did it in my classroom. Now, to set the tale, this is about 2004, still in the midst of the Iraq War. The Navajo Nation has a very, very complicated relationship to America, as you can expect. And there's no good way to live under colonization. And some Navajos still fight the United States in every way they can. But for many others, once colonization was settled and once the Navajo Nation became part of the United States, many in particular from warrior clans said, well, if I'm a warrior, the only way I can be a warrior now is to join the US military. So the Navajo Nation, where I taught, where I love my kids, has the highest percentage of folks joining the military anywhere. And some of that is, of course, a story of class and other opportunities, but a lot of it is deep pride. And pride in particular in the legacy of the code talkers, the Navajo who in World War II literally saved all of us with their language. That legacy is very, very proud. Many of my kids in that era had brothers, uncles, etc., who were overseas. So too did a lot of the Oklahoma teachers have kids, cousins, brothers, sisters who are in Iraq. And that included the music teacher, who I'll call Ms. Johnson for the purpose of this story. Ms. Johnson was one of the ones who had first welcomed me in, who I had lots of judgments about. And on my birthday, Another, perhaps, comedy of errors moment happened where I had a new student who had recently come in my class, and he'd been kicked out of 2 other schools. A lot of stuff going on for my guy, in particular with impulse control. And so he came in that morning on a tear, the student. He was really, really angry. It was a Monday morning. Said, nobody messed with me. He was flipping desks. Say, get out of my way. I'm in a bad mood. I shot my cousin this weekend. So, whoa. I was not ready for that on my birthday. So I tried to say, oh, shoot, what do I do? My kids are all coming in. I've got this whirling dervish of a potential attempted murderer on my hand. So, okay, I see the music teacher, Ms. Johnson, coming down the hall here. I'll ask her to watch my room. So I said, Ms. Johnson, can you watch my room? I get my student out, get him down the hallway, making the scene even more surreal. My friend who taught first grade was having all of his little cute first graders come up to my room to sing me happy birthday. And they were all looking up on me. And I'm like, no, I can't do this. And so I watched all of these deflated first grade faces, adorable faces, broke their hearts. We'll deal with that later. But I get my student calmed down in the corner and said, okay, what's going on here? He said, wait, why are you freaking out? I was like, you said you shot your cousin. It's like, oh yeah, with a BB gun. Oh geez, that's all it was. So I get him calmed down. I get him back in the classroom. I think, okay, crisis averted. We can go on with the day. Then, so walking in my classroom, I notice my kids are staring at me. And Ms. Johnson, the music teacher, gives me a death stare. Walks out. So that was weird. But I don't think too much of it. Later in the day, my kids happened to have music that day. So I walked them to the trailer where the music classroom is, and then walked to pick them up at the time they're supposed to finish, and they're not done. And then they're not done. And they're not done. Then all of a sudden, my kids come out to me with more just steel-jawed anger than I've ever seen them before. And they all passed me by until the last one in the line. They had a flair for the dramatic, my kids did. Hands me a pile of papers. Says, because of you, we're late and we won't get recess. So I have no idea what's happening here. I do eventually get them out for like a little bit of truncated recess, though. I look at their papers. And there were essays they had to write, all copied from the board that Ms. Johnson obviously given the title, which was, how do I feel now that I know that Mr. Bucks is disrespecting all the people who died? I realized the pledge. Here I was, this long-haired hippie recent college graduate, with all my big ideas, thinking I was great. And that's basically the only thing that Ms. Johnson knows about me. So she had her story about me, just like the story I had about her. Then she comes into my classroom. My kids tell her, oh, Mr. Bucks doesn't make a stand for the pledge. And in that moment, in that time with her history and my kids' history, was that a ridiculous reaction on her part? As I read the essays, and a lot of Mr. Bucks doesn't respect all the people we care about, he can go back to whatever country he's from. Sure, it was a little bit over the top. But it was at that moment that I realized that the religion of being right can go both ways. That both of us had put our kids, that we both loved and cared about, in the middle of a proxy war between us. And in my story, I cared more than she did because I had the right politics, because I had read the right books about the history of the Navajo and the United States, because I had the right commitment to anti-racism. In her mind, she was correct because there was something in my kids' lives and something that was important to them that she understood and that she connected with that I never could. And perhaps there were elements that I was right. Perhaps there were elements that she was right. But in both of those moments, it didn't matter who was right because we were both addicted to a religion. And it sure as heck wasn't the religion of being in love. So I share that story now, not to say that 20 years later, I am perfect at being a member of the religion of being in love. But it's that story that set the course for the rest of my life in many ways. Most moments when I realized I've done it again. And also moments that I realized feels good to try something different. And I wrote a whole book and a whole memoir about more missteps on the pathway of being a member of the religion of being in love and the member of the religion of being in right. But where the book leads up to is a pretty predictable place and a pretty familiar place to write now. After a long career in nonprofits and strident social media posts, I realized in the summer of 2016, as I looked at an election cycle, which at that point befuddled me, now feels far too familiar. I realized that my whole career as a progressive, as a person who could tell you all the correct opinions, that I was still in dialogue, even though I didn't want to be, with the Ms. Johnsons of the world. And that American politics was actually being shaped by that dialogue. It's people who are left-leaning like me, trying to state our opinion, people right-leaning, getting mad about that, often I would argue behaving very badly, me responding to that, them responding to that response, and the circle remaining unbroken. And I realized, as I saw the election results in 2016, and as I saw the election results a few weeks ago again, that we're trapped, that for those of us who love justice, that we're trapped in a cycle where we're doing a lot of good in the world, but we're also stuck in a loop that we can't quite seem to get out of. So for me, this attempt to get off that loop has been a return to those words, and a return not just to those words about the religion of being in love, but a reminder of the pastor who spoke them to me. Steve Garnaas Holmes was a special man, but he was mentored by an even more special man. Even though he lived in rural Montana, he happened to get to be mentored by Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa. And the thing about Desmond Tutu stories is they're all the same and they're all beautiful. One of my favorite ones is that one time at the height of the anti-apartheid movement, the government tried to catch him in a gotcha. Because he was an archbishop, he was given a really, really nice house by the diocese. And so they thought, we're going to hire a whole bunch of unemployed Black South Africans to have a protest at his house. And they're going to be poor and he's going to look all rich. And this will be a huge gotcha. We'll invite the media. So they got the protest up there. They hired the guys. They got the protest going. And the media was supposed to show up an hour later when the protest was going full steam. But by the time the media showed up, the plan backfired. Because Tutu had seen the crowd gather around his house. They had signs that said, "We hate you." And so he brought out tea and cookies. And by the time the media arrived, everyone was laughing. Everyone was getting to know each other's stories. And for me, Archbishop Desmond Tutu was a loving man. He was a jovial man. He was a man who loved to laugh. He wasn't afraid of still calling out injustice in every moment. The love for people and the love for life and the love for truth did not preclude him from still speaking with a holy righteousness whenever we were separate from each other and whenever policies and governments were keeping us more separate from each other. But he always knew that fury, that righteousness was never enough. That whoever was put in front of him was a person to connect with. Whatever group he was a part of, including protest groups, had to be the funnest, most life-loving, most joyful groups possible, because that's what was going to bring more people to you. And that there's nothing to life if not the opportunity to seek more and more connection all the time. So I'm not surprised that that Washington Post article about how to cope with this election said join a UU church. Because I'm here this morning and I've already heard 3 points of connection from just announcements and joys of concern with my own life. I've already heard about a community that very clearly cares about building a better world, but also cares about opening its doors, saying there's a place for all of us, and we're going to reach out beyond the borders of our doors here too. And it's not surprising that that happens, that I'm discovering that on the banks of the kind of waters I'm haunted by. And that first message I was given about the religion of right and the religion of love was delivered just a mile away from the waters that haunted Norman McLean. I too am haunted by waters, because waters are connectors. Waters are reminders that we are not separate from each other. And that is the biggest joy of life, and that is the biggest challenge of a life. To remain connected, even when each other makes us so angry, even when the systems that are built by the grand each other makes us so heartbroken. Knowing that it's only in that connection and only seeing that connection with each other that will ever build anything different. It is such a joy to get to be here with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Please stand as you are able in body or spirit for hymn number 34. The closing words are by Harry Meserve, and they are written as a prayer. From arrogance, pompousness, and from thinking ourselves more important than we are, may some saving sense of humor liberate us for allowing ourselves to ridicule the faith of others. May we be forgiven. From making war and calling it peace, special privilege and calling it justice, indifference and calling it tolerance, pollution and calling it progress, may we be cured. for telling ourselves and others that evil is inevitable while good is impossible. May we stand corrected. God of our mixed up, tragic, aspiring, doubting, and insurgent lives, help us to be as good in our hearts as we have always wanted to be. Amen.